Hey folks, in this interview, I'm sitting down with Michael Sasser. He's a boudoir photographer in Los Angeles, California. Hey folks, welcome back to the podcast. I'm here with Michael Sasser. He's a boudoir photographer down in LA, beautiful LA, shooting beautiful people and making beautiful images. Michael has agreed to come on the show to just sort of demystify the world of boudoir photography. What is it? What is it not? How do you get into it? Is there money in it? What gear does he shoot? All this stuff. So he's going to open the kimono for us on this episode of the podcast. Michael Sasser, man, welcome to the show.
How's it going, man? Great to be here.
It's good. You know, I got to tell you, you're one of my YouTube heroes, man. So I'm subscribed and, I've seen your videos and I look at your videos and live vicariously through the Sasser. Right?
I'm happy to hear that, man.
That's awesome. You do fantastic work. It sounds like you got your head on straight with regard to business and ethics and all that stuff. So, I'm a big fan and congratulations on all your successes.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so let's dive in. So boudoir photography, knowing, like I said, I've been watching some of your YouTube videos, and I suggest people that are listening or watching this head over to your channel, and we'll link to it in the notes here. But when I look at your sort of journey to boudoir photography, I believe you started in wedding photography and then transitioned over to boudoir. Can you take us through that and why you made those decisions?
Definitely. I think a lot of people that end up finding boudoir have done some other kind of photography first. My very first years ago, like 13 years ago, was photographing children's sports photography. So I did little Johnny would swing a baseball bat, take a picture of him, and then sell that picture back to his parents. So that was my first ever photography job. And then I've shot everything under the sun: headshots, weddings, high school senior portraits. I did videography, shot wedding films for a while, pretty much you name it. And then from there, I was pretty much only doing weddings when I found boudoir photography. And I kind of juggled both for a little bit until I realized all the reasons why I liked boudoir better and why business-wise it was a better decision, and sort of everything fit together. So I think the main reasons why I switched to boudoir, for the logistical and business reasons, were I was booking weddings a year and a half out in advance, so my schedule was already set a year out in advance. When I moved to Los Angeles from Denver, I still had 13 weddings booked back in Denver. And so what I had to do was I had to fly back and forth 10 times to be able to shoot all of those weddings. And that was a huge pain, a huge inconvenience. And I realized that I didn't want my schedule to be booked out that much in advance in the future. The next thing was creative control. I really wanted to have full creative control when I was shooting with my clients. I found with weddings, it was sort of up to the day. I was more of a fly on the wall. I wasn't able to set up things the way that I wanted, set the time of day, those sort of things, which was huge for me to be able to just fill my creative need, which was another big one. As far as the business side, I found it was more profitable, actually, because there was so much less time spent with the client. I could take so many more shoots, and the per hour rate actually ended up being higher than I was making with weddings, which was amazing, which we can talk about, coming up a little later.
Absolutely, yeah,
and,
sure.
and then the final reason was really because I became really attached to hearing these women's stories of how they have been struggling with their idea of beauty standards, or finding love for themselves, or accepting their bodies. And then when they saw these pictures, it totally blew them away. I saw tears. I heard women, really making changes in their lives, doing things like I had one of my clients said she never owned a two-piece bikini before. She'd only worn one piece. And then after the photo shoot, it gave her the confidence to be able to go out and wear that outfit, because now she finally sort of accepted her body for what it was and wasn't ashamed of it. And she was able to do something as small like that. I found that with weddings, I was really just being a memory aid for these couples to look back on and say things like, that's how I remember the day. That's how I remember our love. It's just more of a memory aid. And I really became attached to the ability to make an impact, change somebody's perspective, help them grow, things like that. And so for all those reasons, I stopped shooting everything but boudoir about 4 years ago.
Wow. Wow. And things have been great so far, right? All the way in. That's amazing. And I talk to a lot of wedding photographers, and you're right. A lot of it is from what they say. I'm not a wedding shooter. From what they say, depending on your level in that genre, money obviously is going to be different, but it's also when you get down to a certain level, people are just paying for insurance to make sure, like you said, they have a record of the day. And if they pay enough, they get a competent enough photographer to document that day and then move on. Not to take any away from the artisan side of wedding photography, but a portion of that is insurance to make sure that, hey, when I fling that garter, somebody that knows how to press the shutter button is going to capture it, right?
And definitely, I don't want to say that wedding photography isn't creative, or that there's nothing special about it. The incredible wedding photos that I've seen are just like, they're jaw dropping, and they make you go, oh my God, that's incredible. Like, how did they do that? Or they evoke an incredible amount of emotion, such strong emotion. But what they don't do is change your perspective on the world that you're in. And so that's more so what I mean about that. They say the biggest difference between a $10,000 wedding photographer and a $5,000 wedding photographer is $5,000. What you're getting at that point, being in the wedding industry and having friends, high-end wedding photographers in the industry, their connection with the client, their ability to help things run smoothly, their ability to keep everybody in line, their ability to so many things that are really important as a part of the wedding photographer's job that's outside of just taking pictures.
Yeah.
But for me, I just wasn't emotionally invested in those things anymore.
Yeah. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about I want to talk about some of the stigma that goes along with boudoir photography and the differences between boudoir and, say, glamour, and what that delta is. But also, along with that is the combating the creepy guy syndrome, or the guy with camera. And we both know those guys are out there that are on Model Mayhem or whatever, and not to put down Model Mayhem, but they're looking for models on Instagram or whatever, and they just want to be around naked or scantily clad women to take pictures that may or may not be good. Some people say, yeah, they may not, back in the film days, they may not have even had film in the camera. Right? They're just there to be there. What do you think of that? How do you combat that sort of stigma that goes along with that when you tell people, yes, I shoot beautiful women for a living?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a topic that comes up a lot. And I think in order to answer that question, you first have to make sure you have your definitions right on what boudoir is, what glamour is. So initially, because boudoir is a little bit misunderstood, if I say, I'm a boudoir photographer, if somebody isn't really familiar with it, they might just think, wait, you just shoot women in their underwear? And then that has its own sort of bubble, their predisposition to assuming what that must mean. And so I think that it really gets split into kind of two different categories, boudoir and glamour. And let's define glamour real quick. So glamour, one of the biggest differences between boudoir and something like glamour is glamour, the goal is to create beautiful images of somebody, often to share those images with the world for promotion, either for that particular woman, to sell a swimsuit, to gain more followers, to maybe once you do gain the followers, then you can sell a product, to maybe to sell a magazine or something like that. The goal is for consumption. Now, boudoir, the goal is more internal. So for the woman who's hiring you for a boudoir shoot, they're getting this done for themselves. They probably haven't ever had a professional picture taken before. They're probably not going to post these pictures on Instagram. If I post them, I'm not tagging that woman. It's not for self-promotion. The end viewer of those photos is not other people, but it's them. Mm-hmm. And so that's a big difference between boudoir and glamour. So if we go into the typical client for boudoir or glamour, let's talk about glamour. Typically, they're younger, 18 to 25 or 30 or something like that. And They've done a lot of different photo shoots before. They're looking to do a lot of photo shoots, again, to build their personal brand, something like this. And then you've got the boudoir client who's probably never had their picture taken before professionally. They're very nervous. They could be doing it for any number of reasons. Like I've photographed women everywhere between the ages of 18 and 63. I've photographed women who have just gotten out of divorces and they're looking to find a way to believe they're desirable again. Mm-hmm. I found women who have had kids and they haven't really been the same since they feel like their body's changed, and are they still desirable? I photographed a woman who got in a car accident. She had reconstructive surgery on her face, and so she was trying to find the person, accept the new person that she was. So these are the more kind of boudoir. And then some women just want to be prettier. They just want to get it as a gift for their husband, or they're getting married or anything like that. Those could still take place. But for me, I am photographing the people who come to me. They say, I'd like a photo shoot for this reason. I'd like to hire you for it. Whereas I think a lot of the guy with camera, the glamour, you're sort of sifting through trying to find the prettiest girls to photograph so that you can have an opportunity to take pictures of the prettiest girls. So I think when you're talking about like how do you deal with the stigma of wanting to take pictures of pretty girls, I think first you have to define what's my purpose? Why am I doing this in the first place? Sure, I have beautiful clients. These are a couple of my clients right behind me, right here. And they're absolutely beautiful. But for both of them, this isn't something that they're, this woman here, she said she can't wait to share her pictures with her 2-year-old daughter to show her that her body's nothing to be ashamed of. Mm-hmm. So if you're getting into this discussion and, if boudoir is what you want to do and somebody questions your character and says, okay, but you're just shooting, naked women just to get a chance to shoot naked women. And you say, well, the goal is to have women change their perspective of how they view their bodies. And I think it's of themselves. I think it's very difficult to go through life being told you're not good enough and being told that, in order to be desirable, you must be skinny. And in order to be loved, you must wear this kind of makeup or whatever it is. And to show them that the person that they are is enough. Two things can happen. One is that person can, wow, I guess that makes sense. I didn't really realize that. Or the other is they could say, yeah, but you're a guy and you're just really just shooting that to see naked women. If you get that answer, that's fine. You're not going to change that person's mind. Just like, everybody's got opinions about whatever. Your job isn't to convince that person of the validity of what you do. There are always going to be people who are making assumptions about you. There are people out there who don't like Oprah. There are people out there who don't like Obama, who don't like Trump. No matter what you do, no matter how you help people, Bill Gates, Gandhi, whatever it is, certain people are going to disagree with your choices in life. And so you can either listen to those people. Can't please everyone. You can listen to those people, or you can take your steps to make a difference in people's life. If you want to shoot glamour and just creatively, you love, photographing beautiful women, you should do that too. People are still going to judge you. There's no real way around that. But I think regardless of what you do, you should approach it with a professional perspective. The guys that are using their cameras as an excuse to take pictures of pretty girls versus photographers who are trying to create imagery, I think that alone comes off in what people, in the way your clients are going to react to you, in the way they're going to talk about you after the shoot, and those sort of things.
And I wonder with that, as someone who's in the trenches and you're doing this, every day or multiple times a week, people that come to you, they don't know, and they're not in the genre, right? So if they come in with a perception that what you do is glamour photography, right? And they're like, hey, where are the feather boas and all that stuff? How do you reset their expectations into, no, this is what this is about. That's a completely different genre.
Absolutely. It starts, this is, we can talk about brand for a second, because this is, your brand is more than your logo, right? So the language on your website, the language on your Instagram posts, the language on your, the types of photos that you choose to share. I was speaking with a photographer who photographs both models and your everyday women. And she has a hard time posting her everyday women to her Instagram because her models get so much more attention in the post. They get more likes. And as a result, it ends up sort of scaring off some of your everyday women who would like to hire her because they're like, I'm not as pretty as that model. I'm not going to be getting as many likes as that picture. I'm not going to, we talked about it and I recommended if she wants to shoot more everyday women, she should post more everyday women. So it starts with you. It starts with how you want to portray yourself. So on my website, when somebody goes to my website, it doesn't say photographing the hottest girls or whatever. It has a quote from somebody that says, for the first time in my life, I was able to see myself as a whole instead of picking the individual pieces of my body apart.
Yeah.
Now, when somebody reads that, they're not going to wonder why I don't see any feather boas. They're going to start to understand what my brand is about and why I'm here, which is why I don't really get too many. I've gotten a few just this past month, I think because of what's happening right now, because of COVID-19 and because everybody's stuck inside. I've gotten a few of people saying something, they inquire and they say, hey, I'm just looking for some sexy pictures. That almost never happens. Typically what they say is, hey, I'm getting married and I'm looking for boudoir pictures, but I'm nervous. What do I need to know? Or they'll say, I'm going through this thing, or it's an anniversary gift, or I'm finally turning 30 and I want to document this before I have kids, or whatever it is. So in your brand, that's where the way you talk about it is the way people are going to receive it.
Yeah.
So if you're, how do I get people to see that what I'm doing is boudoir? Then you have to talk about it in a way where they'll understand that sort of thing. Again, you can't convince everybody. Some people will just, on occasion, I'll get somebody to message me on Instagram that says, wow, you're really beautiful. And they haven't looked at anything. They're just assuming I'm a woman with pretty pictures on my thing because they haven't taken time to read. So some people will just bypass it all and just make assumptions. But again, and this is the thing that's really important to know, is that you don't have to convince everybody. You just have to convince your clients. So for me, my goal is 4 to 6 clients a month. If I get 5 or 6 clients, that's amazing for the averages that I'm earning per client. That's perfect. And if I can convince, and I don't say convince, if 5 women every month look at my work and like it and trust me to photograph them in Los Angeles, I promise you there are women in every city who would either prefer a male photographer or are apathetic to whether or not they're male or female, who would hire you if your brand message is right.
All right, so Michael, so thinking about the differences between, let's call it the model, the professional poser, beautiful person, attractive, versus the everyday person that comes into your studio. How do you get good at making the everyday person look like those pictures on the wall behind you? Like, what's the secret to getting Michael Sasser good?
Thanks, man. Yeah. So if we're just talking image quality, the short answer is practice. I mean, you just have to practice. You got to shoot a lot. However much you're shooting, you could honestly probably be shooting a lot more. That is definitely the first tip that I give everybody, is just to shoot more. Watch videos, definitely do those things. Take some instruction. But if you're not taking action, if you're not doing the shoots, then your ability to improve is only going to happen so much.
Yeah.
The next thing to do is that I hear a lot of people are kind of fearful when they're like, I've got a client coming in who's a little curvier. I'm not sure what to do. I'm afraid she's not going to like her photos. I'm afraid that I'm going to take bad pictures, or I don't know how to make her look like a model. And especially in boudoir, the purpose is not to make somebody look like somebody that they're not. I think this is where people get really confused, is that the goal is to show just the best version of them. And women who have curves, and women who are size 14 are size 14, and women who are size 0 are size 0. And the person that they are isn't what we're trying to avoid or pretend that they aren't. The goal is just to create a flattering version of themselves, because you're not the client, they're the client. And this is where I think a lot of men have a hard time, because they're like, I'm not physically attracted to somebody who's a size 10. How am I going to photograph them in an attractive way? And you have to take yourself out of it, because again, you're not the client. It doesn't matter what you think. Nobody cares what you think. If I'm going to be really honest, nobody cares what you think. The only person whose opinion matters is that client. I there's a really good a friend of mine, Terry. She does a lot of body positivity, a lot of boudoir stuff. She wanted to have her pictures done, boudoir shoot done, and after the boudoir shoot, when she got her pictures back, they were only headshots, no pictures of her full body, and she's what you would consider plus sized. And all of a sudden, she was like, "Wait, why didn't the photographer show me any pictures of my body? Does she not like my body?" And then it started to make Terry start to question herself. Is this something I'm supposed to be hiding? So really the goal is to just take the people know what they look like, take the best pictures of them, take your own opinions of what you find beautiful out of it.
Yeah,
So that's the first thing. The second thing is, sure, you can use light, posing, arching your back thins people out. Where you place your hands, you can use leading lines. You can use sheets to cover up places that the client may be self-conscious about. There are a lot of little tricks and things like that, but those tricks become much easier once you kind of get it outside of your head that the point is to make somebody look like something that they're not. They're like, I'm never going to be able to make this woman look like this girl in this magazine, so she's not going to like the pictures, so the pictures aren't going to be good, so they're going to be unflattering. And that isn't, if you go into it with that mindset, you're already setting yourself at a disadvantage. And the same thing, when you do have a beautiful client, you post a picture of a beautiful client, sometimes you'll get other photographers to say something like, well, she's just a beautiful client. You couldn't take a bad picture of her. And what they're not realizing is they're just saying, I'm just attracted to that person. They're not necessarily saying that, like, this picture would be better than this picture because of her hand placement. This picture is better than this picture because of the light. All they can see is the beauty of that woman, and that places them at a disadvantage for being able to improve their work. So if your mentality is a prettier woman will yield a better photograph, then your genre should probably be more focused on glamour than it should be boudoir. Because the point isn't getting the most attractive client. The point is photographing that person in a beautiful way, whoever it may be. And so basically to go back to like the technical answer, it's practice a lot. Use things like sheets, like pillows, like outfit choices, and posing and lighting to, maybe use those things to what you might, it's such a funny term, flattering. Flattering basically means skinny. We say flattering.
Accentuate the positive and minimize the negative, right?
Exactly. And so that's like the technical answer. The mental answer, the sort of thing that's going to help the most, is to get outside of your head that the whole thing is that women are supposed to look a certain way. And that's what got us into this. That's why boudoir is so powerful in the first place. Because it's removing that stigma of you're supposed to look like this woman, so I'm going to photograph you to look like this woman. When we photograph them to look like themselves, that's when the real transformation, that's when the real power happens.
And how do you, as the professional in this, and how do you reconcile when? And I know that I'm gonna go out on a limb and say I know this has happened. When a woman comes to you and they say, you know what, make me look thinner, or remove this thing. Do you have a philosophy when it comes to what's on limits and what's off limits with regard to retouching and liquefy and all that stuff?
Absolutely. I definitely do. And this is a controversial topic. I mentioned it in one of my Q&A videos, and a huge discussion got started in the group that was very angry, which I was surprised about. But basically, my rule is if it's permanent, leave it in. If it's temporary, take it out. And what that means, if you've got blemishes, if you've got your zits, if you got women bump into, you could sleep in a super soft bed. When that woman wakes up, probably she's going to have something on her leg, some sort of bruise. It's just the nature of it. I've almost never photographed a woman who didn't have some sort of a little bruise on her leg. I take those out. Those are temporary, right? But I think that, again, going back to the whole purpose of boudoir is if they can accept the picture of themselves with less editing, that does more for their mental, what they get out of it mentally, than it would be with an over photoshopped picture. Now, the opposite side of that, so let's say somebody comes in and says, hey, I'm really nervous about the stretch marks on my stomach after I have my second kid. Can you Photoshop those out? My response is, if you really want them Photoshopped out, I can do that. I will do that. But that's a part of your story. You love your kid. that's who you are right now, and that's who you look at in the mirror every day. And I think that to show a picture of you that doesn't have your stretch marks in it is not an actual representation of you. And the person that you are with your stretch marks is a beautiful person. And so if you want me to take them out, I will. But if you leave them in, I think it's that's more what I believe in. That's kind of more why I focus on boudoir.
I just wonder how you reconcile that with we live in sort of an Instagram narcissistic selfie world, right? Where people are running filters on themselves, and the show Catfish was Catfish for a reason, right? So how do you reconcile the reality of, okay, I'm going to make you're beautiful the way you are, I'm just going to bring that out and make amazing pictures that you're going to love, versus I'm going to take shots of you and massage it into an idealistic version of yourself, and the customer expectation around that.
Okay, so the first thing is this is going to go again with the brand, what we started talking about from the beginning, is that if your language is get magazine quality, look like a supermodel.
Yeah. If
that's your language, then that's probably more so what people are going to expect. If your language is more about acceptance and body acceptance, and the real you is the one, to fall in love with, then you're going to attract that type of client. It's like the same reason why one person might choose a Ford over a Toyota or whatever it is. Now, a lot of women, sorry, let me take that back. A lot of photographers say, well, if you Photoshop correctly, they won't notice it. You do a little liquefy here, a little liquefy there. Their outfit didn't fit. You push this in, you take that out, whatever. And then it allows your client to see themselves as beautiful, because what happens a lot is they'll focus in on one little tiny thing. They'll look, can you zoom in on that? And they'll go and you see that dot? And I'm like, why are you looking at that dot when the entirety of the picture is so beautiful? I just can't get over that one little dot. So a lot of people believe that if you take those things out, then they will be able to see themselves as a whole, and then they will be able to see themselves as beautiful. And so doing that is not doing them a disservice. In fact, it's finally allowing them to focus on themselves as a whole instead of those little things. So I think most people want the same thing. They just sort of are going about it differently. Again, you're talking about like in a world of Instagram selfies and filters, and people are making their faces smaller. Like that, again, isn't my typical client. The woman who hires me isn't doing a bunch of filters and like beach selfies and just woke up, just this is how I woke up, and their hair is already done. Like that's not my typical client. And so they're not really asking for those sort of things, which is different than if you are targeting women between 18 and 25 who are, they're
at their prime at that point. Yeah. That's really interesting. And this is really helpful, because it's, you're drawing not a thin line, but a really thick line between the different genres and the differences between boudoir and self-empowerment versus complete aesthetics and let's do it for the likes and the thumbs up. I want to transition a little bit into the mechanics of this business.
Sure.
And back to the shoot. So you're doing the posing, you're adept at that, and you're bringing out the best in the person. What's happening on shoot day? Is it just you and the model? Is it you and the model and a makeup artist and a stylist? And how does that piece work?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's me and the makeup artist and my client. We're getting hair and makeup downstairs. I'm usually down there for about 15 to 20 minutes of it to build some comfort, to talk, to go over, to catch up, to just sort of build some rapport. And then I usually come upstairs and I get some work done, or I get some emails done or something like that. And then after that, my makeup artist typically leaves, and it's just me and my client. And then we shoot for about an hour and a half. This topic is another one, around male photographers. Again, I think there's a big difference in the genre. This is what's so funny about it, is that the woman who is hiring me, like we said, has never really done this before. So they're looking to me because I'm the professional and I'm going to walk her through it, and she trusts me to do that. Whereas if you're shooting glamour or something, you've got your girl who's done a bunch of photo shoots. She's worked with some photographers who already didn't have the best intentions. She doesn't know what your intentions are. She's assuming that if you're a guy photographer, all of these things are just irrelevant to what my particular situation is. I was talking to a photographer who's in Seattle, and he does the same as me. He photographs these women, he posts them, and he doesn't tag them because these are moms and teachers, and we're not going to tag your photos. People aren't going to be like, who is this? Oh, she's a middle school teacher. Great. Like, that's not going to happen. So he had a woman, a model, who reached out to him, or whatever the scenario was. Hey, I'm looking to do some pictures. He's like, great, we'll do it here. She was like, why haven't you sent me the makeup artist information? And then she was trying to reach out to the makeup artist information. Is this a legit photographer? He hasn't tagged any of his models. And it's this sort of this control, this like, we all have to be really careful because who knows what'll happen. Again, that's very much in this genre of glamour. You hear about this, but in boudoir, my client, I tell them, you can bring a friend if you want, but most of the time they're going to be less comfortable with their friend there because their friend hasn't really seen him walking around naked, or they haven't seen him in underwear. The poses that we're going to be doing can be hard to get in that mindset when you know that there's a third person in the room watching you. Yeah. So most of my clients are actually more comfortable without an extra person there.
Do you ever worry about like the knock on wood that this would happen, but the liability and the potential of someone making an unfounded accusation against you, or filing some sort of lawsuit because it's your word against this person?
Yeah, I think that's a valid question. I personally have never been worried of that.
Cool.
Cool. And I think that comes from a couple things. So I've photographed over 400 boudoir shoots with just me and the woman. Wow. And not one scenario has been a situation where, and I think this is a lot, an unfounded accusation. I think you have to look at a few things. I think you first have to look at what does that person get out of it? I've heard of some models calling out photographers who didn't receive pictures. Hey, I want all the pictures. Well, I'm not going to give you all the pictures. You haven't paid for them. Well, I want them, or else, and then they'll say he said inappropriate things, or he did inappropriate things, and that's gotten them blacklisted. I've heard of that scenario happening before. But you have to ask, like, what do they get out of it? What does somebody get out of, calling out a photographer? They're going to have to, they're going to be in the news. That's never a fun thing. They get more pictures. Maybe they get some money. It's just, to me, for you to go through and do that, you have to really want to put somebody in the ground to put yourself through that as well. And so I'm personally never really worried about that. You get reviews from your past clients. You treat them with respect. You don't do anything disrespectful. The way that you speak to them is respectful. I don't, I just think the people that are really worried about that typically haven't shot ever. Most of the time, I don't hear from anybody that's like, hey, I've been shooting this for about a year and now I'm worried about somebody calling me out. Most of the time you hear that from somebody that's like, I'd like to shoot it, but I'm worried that I'm going to get sued.
Yeah. That is interesting. That because as an outsider looking in, that's one of the things that I think about. Like, how do you protect yourself, liability wise, especially with all this Me Too stuff going on? If someone files some unfounded accusations against you, and for whatever reasons, they don't like you, they don't like the way you cut your hair, or you said that you like this politician versus that one, so they want to tank you. Like, how
you could do that, but what are the results, right? Yeah. What do they go through? What do they go through then? That's going to put them also in the spotlight.
It's a lot of work. Yeah.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of, now and especially this is the problem with the system is like their character is going to start being called into question, and they're going to get polarizing from both sides. If they're a model, maybe photographers don't want to work with them anymore because they're worried that they're going to get called out. Or if you're, if you're a mom of two, the chances that you're going to go on Instagram and say this photographer who actually was a stand-up guy took advantage of the situation. Now, one thing I do have in my contract that says, you understand this is a boudoir shoot. You understand the types of pictures that we're going to be taking. You understand that I'm going to be asking you to be in risque poses, and you're signing up for this. You're voluntarily saying that you understand that this is not a regular headshot shoot, that this is boudoir. Now, that said, you know, if you do something inappropriate and you're trying to take advantage of that situation, I just don't see it happening with, that's the thing, is just like, I don't know. It's such a big topic that I think so little about.
That's good. That's good. That's good. You stay focused on the positive. The world is full of good people, right? And, you know, it's stay focused on the positive, but be aware on the periphery that this could happen and how you react. So, like, shifting gears to the, you know, like I said, the mechanics of all this. You're a boudoir photographer looking at this industry, looking at your website, and I want to be like Michael Sasser. I want to get to that point at some point in the next decade or so. But I haven't shot anybody. I haven't, you know, I think I know how to shoot, make the assumption that the photographer has the chops and they know their way around photography, posing and f-stops and shutter speeds, but they haven't done anything beyond that. How do they get that first crop of clients in the door in order to get the next crop and start climbing the ladder?
So if you're needing to build your portfolio, the simplest thing you can do is just reach out to anybody and everybody you know. When I first started, I made a post on Facebook. I messaged some wedding planners. I messaged some friends of mine. I photographed pretty much anybody who would say yes. I just let people know, hey guys, I'm thinking about shooting boudoir. Who wants to volunteer and get some pictures? That's going to be your first thing. And then they're going to know people and they're going to know people. What's interesting is that with boudoir, people are really nervous about saying that they do it. And as a result, it makes them really hard to get their name out there because they're afraid of judgment. And then if they're afraid of judgment, then nobody hears about them. And if nobody hears about them, then they don't get booked. Then it ends up being a cycle. Yeah. So the first thing is just reach out to a bunch of people, say that's what you're shooting, get a couple of photo shoots, you know, do a couple of photo shoots and start putting together your website. I think having a website is a good way, specifically a boudoir website is a good way to show yourself as a professional. That's kind of the first thing that I would do. Get reviews. So the first thing is really, to me, it's building a trust base that shows that you're shooting this, you got good intentions. Photograph somebody, ask them for a review, put that review up on your website.
And then go from there.
And then you go from there. The next thing you're going to do is and then after you have that, then you have to drive people to your website. And there are a number of different ways to do that. You could run ads. You could you could have a private Facebook group. You could do search engine optimization. I think where a lot of people get stuck is they just have their Instagram page. And then the people that reach out to them, they're assuming that because they're on Instagram, they're shooting for free. Mm. And they're never able, like, how do I find somebody who's willing to pay for me? And the answer, I think it's so funny talking about this. Essentially, there are like a lot of different people out there who are looking for different things. There are plenty of people looking for free photos. There are also plenty of people who don't want to do a free photo shoot with nude pictures because how are they going to trust somebody? There are some things you don't want discounts on. Mm-hmm. You probably don't want a discount on LASIK surgery. Mm-hmm. You probably don't want to do a Groupon for skydiving, mm-hmm. right? You probably don't want to do free pictures of something so intimate and something that and with somebody who's hasn't shown that they have the right intentions and aren't looking to be professional and things like that. So that's why you can earn so much. One of the reasons why you can earn so much with boudoir is because I've had people say, you know, my wedding photographer says she shoots boudoir, but I wanted somebody who like specialized in boudoir because I don't know what I'm doing. And I want it to be somebody who understands the delicacy of it. And I want somebody who all of those things. And I'm willing to pay a premium for that.
I love that. I love that. So then on that tangent, business wise, right? So, you know, the photographer taking the photographer down that road, they're competent, they're a good shooter, they've done the right things with SEO and ads and all that, and they've got some clients coming in now. What's the money look like in this industry? You mentioned that it's better for you, it's better in wedding photography, but what does that look like? Can you pay your car payment? Can you eat on it? Are you eating ramen noodles or steak?
Well, I'll tell you like a little bit of my history of how I priced this when I first started, and then where I'm at now, and what I've heard other people are able to do. So the first thing is, when I started, I was already doing high school senior portraits and weddings, so I had some idea of how pricing worked. So I started what I would consider pretty cheap. It was only about $200 for a session fee, and that included hair and makeup. And then from there, they would purchase an album of 10 pictures for like $250. So when I first started, my low end was $450 a client, which was great. And they could buy a little bit larger album for like $350 or $400 or whatever it was. They could buy the digitals. And if I made $800 on a client, it was like the most amazing day. This is when I first started. This would have been this is 2013, so about 7 years ago when I first started shooting boudoir in Denver, Colorado. Then as I kind of continued to shoot some more and raise my prices, I was starting to average around $1,000 a shoot. And then when I moved to LA, I really started taking boudoir seriously, and I stopped shooting pretty much everything else except for I still had a couple weddings booked, but I was really focused on boudoir. Then my average started to get up to $1,500. And now I just did because I made a video for my course explaining what kind of money that you can make. In my last 14 shoots, I've averaged $3,700 per client.
Wow.
So as far as like what's possible, that's absolutely possible. As a male photographer, how can a male shoot this? How can women trust him to shoot and spend numbers like $3,500? My top collection right now is $5,000. I have clients book it. I had a client prepay for that collection recently. I will on occasion, my lowest collection right now it's $500 to shoot, and that includes none of the photos. And then they purchase an album, 10 images for $1,000. So pretty much to get in the door, you're looking at around $1,500. And again, this goes back to that you don't need to book every single client. You only need to book the women who connect with your brand, who connect with why you're doing this, who like your pictures, who feel comfortable with you, who are drawn to your work, and value it. People spend money on what they value.
Yeah.
A girl who's like, hey, I just need a couple more Instagram pictures, probably is going to see the value in spending $4,000. But a woman who has really lost touch with her identity, and she's looking for a way to find it, maybe $4,000 is a steal for that person. Mm-hmm. So that, as far as the numbers go, when I was shooting wedding videography, I was averaging about $4,000, $4,500 a shoot, or a wedding, which is more money on average, but it was so much more time. I had an hour and a half drive to the venue. I had my gas costs. I had an assistant shooter. I had to pay an editor. I had 10 hours, 12 hours on the day. You had leading up to it, you had the hours doing that. I had hosting costs for where they were going to download the videos. And then I had to go to networking events. And there's still marketing involved with boudoir, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But when you broke it down per hour, 20 hours for a wedding versus 7 hours for a boudoir client. Plus I can shoot during the week. I don't have to shoot, I have a limit. I only book 6 months out in advance. So if they call me up and they say, hey, my wedding's in 9 months, I want to shoot in 8 months, I say, call me in 2 months. Mm-hmm. I'm just not going to book that person because I don't know what my life's going to look like then, if I'm going to change my pricing, if I'm going to move a city. I don't really do it. So can you earn a living on boudoir? Absolutely. Can it be profitable? Absolutely. Is it hard work? Yeah. Absolutely.
Anything worth doing is hard work. Okay, here's a devil's advocate question. Okay. So someone watching this would say, yeah, that's easy for you to say, Sasser. You're living in LA, the entertainment capital of the world that is overflowing with beautiful people. You have a studio, you're talented, you're a good-looking guy. The arrows are all pointed in your direction. What if it's, someone's living in a small town, not that many people, they don't have a studio location to invite people in and make them feel comfortable? What should that person do? Should they wait until they can get to that level, or is there a path to, making a living with this for them?
So when I first started shooting and I was in Denver, and I was charging $500 a shoot, I was shooting out of my home, out of my house, in an extra room in the back. It was a big room with good light, no question, but it was in my home, and my furniture. I had a futon. I had a futon that I bought for $100 on Craigslist, and I threw a sheet over it. And sometimes it was a bed, and sometimes it was a couch.
Nice.
And this is what I used to earn my first, I don't know, $5,000 to $10,000 shooting boudoir, and nobody batted an eye. And then when I did move to LA, I shot in an apartment with two roommates that were both in their separate rooms, and I had the master bedroom, which had a bathroom that was connected, but the guest bedrooms, the bathroom was in the hallway. And the only time the light was good in that space was between like 8 a.m. and 11 a.m. So that's when we would start hair and makeup, is around 8 a.m., which meant that my roommates couldn't leave their rooms to even use the restroom during my photo shoot. So they either had to leave the house or do whatever they needed to in the morning, get breakfast, then go back into their rooms and keep their doors closed and not make any noise. Wow. I didn't have a bed. So for about a year, I did photo shoots, did about 10 boudoir shoots that didn't have a mattress. They were all either on a couch or a table or up against a wall. I had yellow walls. We were three dudes who just moved in. Like, it was not a beautiful place. In fact, if you want to see my studio, what it used to be, I've got a YouTube video that just says tips for improving your studio, and it's my studio tour. You can see that.
Cool. Yeah.
So that didn't stop me. I had clients that came in and spent over $2,000. This would have been 3 years ago. And I had clients spend over $2,000, and it was great. Now, if you're living so that's the studio, debunk the studio. Can you do it in a small studio? I see women shooting out of their second bedrooms all the time. That's basically what I ended up doing when I first started. That's not, that shouldn't be a hindrance. Also, there are things like PeerSpace that cut into your profits, but they give you a place to shoot, Airbnbs you can rent, things like that, so you can shoot in those studios. The second piece, what if I'm not in the entertainment capital of the world? So I think hopefully through this conversation, you've heard that my clients are not actresses and they're not models, right? Yeah. Those are not the women who are paying me to shoot. I get a number of lawyers. I get a number of healthcare workers. I get a number of people like this who are not your people aren't doing this to forward their career in the entertainment industry, right? Yeah. So that's the next thing to take note. These are everyday women. Now, LA does have plenty of money. No question there. Things are expensive in LA. Cost of living is higher. Things are more expensive. That said, it's important to note, so if you're in a small city, chances are you've got a bigger city within an hour or two of you. Most cities have a bigger city that live within an hour or two of them. So if you're in Tyler, Texas, Dallas and Fort Worth are 2 hours away. You can still market to those people. You can go into Dallas and shoot. You can share a space with another photographer. There's plenty of money in Dallas, and anybody within a 2 hour range for somebody who's I've had women drive up from San Diego. I've had women fly down from San Francisco. I've had women fly out from Austin. If you do the things correctly, then your location is less important. The next thing I want to say is that people spend money on what they value. So it's easy to say, oh, she's rich, she can spend $5,000, that's no problem. Sometimes that is true, but we all know really wealthy people who are the most, we'll say, stingy. They're the people who, when you say, hey, why don't we just get some candy at the movie theater? They'll say they overcharge for the movie theater. And you're like, you make $800,000 a year. Why are you making a big deal about candy in a movie theater? We all know people like that. It's because people spend money on what they value. So I have clients that roll up in nice brand new BMWs who only spend the $1,500. Then I have clients who come in 10-year-old Toyotas with hubcaps missing that spend $3,500.
Wow.
Again, that's our own if you've ever read the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, he talks about thin slicing. And to treat everybody the same, you'll more likely have better sales. He talks about a car salesman who's the best car salesman in the state. And he did some research. Why do you sell so many cars? And he said, because I assume everybody can buy a car. I don't, if the teenager comes in to look at the Mustang, who knows? Maybe his dad's going to come in the next day. If the woman is coming to look at the minivan, and you assume a guy's supposed to buy that car. Maybe she's actually the breadwinner of that family. I've gone in to buy a car, a nice car, and I was wearing flip-flops, and nobody talked to me. And then the next time I went in, I wore dress shoes, and I had a bunch of people coming up to talk to me. So no matter what, if you're getting done with the gym and you go buy a car, you may be the CEO of that company. You may just be getting off from the gym. That people pre-assume that you can or can't spend the money is the problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the biggest thing. People spend money on what they value. If you can connect with them, again, are they coming in to refill their Instagram page? They're not going to value the pictures that much. If they're coming in to get over a mental hurdle they've been holding on to for 30 years, yes, it's absolutely worth it. No matter if you do have to go on a payment plan, or if you have to decide to not eat out for the next couple of weeks. Like people will spend money on what they value.
I love that. That's very well said. I want to wrap this up and switch the conversation a little bit to gear. And some of the one of the choices, speaking of gear, one of the choices that you made was to only shoot with available light and not strobe. A lot of photographers will say, yeah, I got to have a giant, softbox, octabox, and this, et cetera, in order for me to do my stuff. Why aren't you in that camp? Why are you in the available light camp?
There's a few main reasons for that. The first one is I'm just better at shooting natural light, if we're honest, is the first reason. But the main reason is that everything that I do in my business is about the client. What are they going to be more comfortable with? What's going to give them a better experience? And back when I used to shoot with strobes, I found that I spent so much time checking the settings of my camera, moving the light a little bit. Hold that pose right there. I'm going to just make this adjustment over here. Let me go ahead and I'm just going to take that test shot. Just have to make one more adjustment. And I don't have to do that when I shoot natural light. There's no barrier between me and the client, which is really important for somebody who's never really had their picture taken before. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it can be intimidating for somebody to have a whole bunch of gear. This again goes back to the difference between glamour and boudoir. If you're used to shooting on commercial photo shoots, you might assume that if this person doesn't have any lights, that they're less professional.
Yeah. I'm
used to, that guy is just obviously in it to check out women because he doesn't even have lights. Okay, that means that you're very sheltered. You don't understand the boudoir industry at all. And this is where people can get defensive. I was told that I was only in it for the wrong reasons when that person doesn't even understand the industry at all. So for me, I want it to be the least amount of intimidating as possible. And if it's just me and the person, then there's not things that they don't recognize. There's not things, if you've ever gone into an area where you didn't understand what was around you, it can be more intimidating, not more comforting. So those are a couple of the big reasons. Also, I can take a lot more pictures because I don't have to wait for the flash to regenerate. I don't have to constantly move the strobe. If I want to take a picture from here, and then I want to walk over here and take the picture from here, I don't have to worry about that octabox being in my way, anything like that. So those are the main reasons. Now, I know not everybody has access to great light. I specifically chose this place because it did get good light. Mm-hmm. And most of the cases, all people need is a window, just one window, throw some shears on it, and they're set. They just have to learn how to shoot with that light. And the best thing you can do to do that is just repetition. But those are some of the main things. If you have to shoot with a strobe, do it. I know plenty of boudoir photographers that use lights, and they look amazing. It's just never been.
This is finding your own style and the stuff that you like to do, right? Then the other side of that coin is the camera. Looking at some of your YouTube videos, I watched one where you were talking about, I think it was back when you were shooting Canon or Sony, but you were talking about shooting specifically with a 50 mil only. Are you still, I know you've moved over to the Fuji world, are you still sticking with one fixed focal length lens?
I am. Like 100% of my images, it's funny to go back Lightroom, you can say like, which lens was this taken with? And I've got my stuff categorized by years. If you see, it used to be 35, 50, 85 and kind of between the two. Mm-hmm. And then it was more, then it was like a little bit more 50 until it went to like 100% 50. And yeah, I love that focal length. I've got a video on it on why I chose it. Yeah. The 35 is an amazing lens. It has a specific character to it. And if that's the character you're looking for, no other lens is going to give you that look. The 85 millimeter has so much impact. It's just like, bam, like when you look at it, it's just so intense. The compression on it is amazing. But I didn't want my images for people to see it and to go, whoa, what is that? Is intense. What was that shot with? I wanted it to be more personal and honest, and not so much about the focal length and more so about the person in the image, which is why I stick around with that 50 millimeter focal length. Now, that's right. So I did switch to Fuji. I switched to medium format because I want to play around with a bigger sensor and see if I liked it, and I do. I love it. This is a 65 millimeter, and but with a crop, the way the crop works. So on a 1.5 crop, you've got your crop sensor, your APS-C size sensors.
Yep.
You go from 35 times 1.5 ends up being close to 50 millimeters. So that matches on a full frame. 65 millimeter, it's the opposite. 65 millimeter on medium format is like 50 millimeter on full frame. It just changes the perspective a little bit. So I am still on a 50 millimeter equivalent, but just on a 65 millimeter lens. I hope that made sense.
It does. It does. Cool. And you like that. So, and you're shooting, I'm assuming, wide open for the most part, right?
I'm shooting mostly wide open. I've started to shoot at 2.8 a little bit more to get a little bit crisper images. But on my Sony, I shot exclusively pretty much 1.4 because the autofocus was so good. This lens is not as sharp around the edges. So in order to make that a little bit sharper, I've been stopping down. Along with that, I manual focus this lens, so that gives me a little bit of leeway as well. But yeah, I think, shallow depth of field, I find it really dreamy, which I really, really love. But I mean, do with what you want to do.
I love it. I love it. Man, you're a wealth of information, and you just speaking of that, we touched on the sort of the tip of the iceberg on a lot of topics in this interview, and you go into a lot of detail on these topics in a course that you've developed. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I put out a ton of free stuff on YouTube. If anybody's curious about learning photography or things like that, I want to make that accessible, and I want to share my knowledge and make it fun. But I have been so grateful for what the business of Boudoir has really done for me and for my life and for my clients. And so I wanted to put together like a how to start your own boudoir business course. So that's available at my website, boudoircourses.com. And we cover like a lot of the stuff that we've discussed, but in detail. Things like posing. How do you get good at posing people? There's my 25 best-selling poses. Okay, you need a good website, but what even goes on that? I've got, the 4 pages that I think you absolutely should have on your website to help you book more clients. You might say, okay, but like I've never priced anything before. How do you get to averaging $3,700? I walk through my pricing guide, and I share where you can start, how you can start, more similar to where I started. Yep. So all of those different things like that are all in that course that I really think is just amazing. The feedback on it's been awesome. Yeah. So if people are more interested in starting their boudoir business, that's a great resource. If you just want to get better at photography or maybe learning some of the ins and outs of how to shoot boudoir, I mean, there's plenty of that on YouTube.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I actually, before we even did this interview, a couple of days ago, I bought your course. So I have one, and I just started it. So I'm sort of inching my way through it. One piece of feedback is you need to increase the price of that course.
Well, yeah.
Because I was looking at your sales page. I was like, oh, this is awesome. Okay, what's this going to be? How much is this thing? And I got to the price, and I was like, okay, let me just go ahead and get this before he wises up and increases the price.
That's right. So right now it's I appreciate that. And this is sort of something, you can have very expensive things. Since it's an online digital product, I really want to make this accessible. I think the more people that are able to do boudoir and do it right with the correct intentions, a lot of people think, well, that will just dilute the industry. But really what it's going to do is it's going to raise the value, because so many more people are going to be people are going to understand the value of boudoir so much more, and that will raise the value of everything. And right now, because there's social distancing and people are quarantined, I do have a discount on the course that will be going back up after we get the green light that everybody can go outside again. But I figured while people are inside, they can't go anywhere. I really want to make that kind of education available so people can get ready once they can start booking shoots again and really get out there. But I've definitely heard that. Definitely heard that before.
That it was underpriced. Yeah, no, for sure. And cool. It's awesome, man. You're doing that. And we'll link to, all of your Instagram, your website, and the courses in the show notes for this episode.
Beautiful.
Any parting shots you want to throw out there for photographers that are considering this genre and considering diving into it?
Yeah. I think the main thing is just to find out why you would be interested in this to begin with, and if you can connect with that, then you don't really have to worry about people who might be judgmental or that don't see eye to eye with you, because there will always be people who don't see eye to eye. So first thing is just, and you're like, if you are a male, you might say, well, I'm not a woman. How do I relate to this? We all have women in our lives. We all have, we've got sisters, we've got mothers, we've got friends. And we want them to, believe in themselves as much as they can. And so, maybe connect to some of their stories. That'd be the first thing. And then the second thing is, I think that's probably it. Just take action. A lot of people talk about it. You do the research, you watch the videos, and then you don't get started. And and then
the years roll by, and you're like, oh man, I remember back in 2020 when we were on quarantine. I thought about it. I should have done it then, right? So just do it, right?
That's right.
Yep. I love it. All right, Michael Sasser, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's a pleasure chatting with you. Like I said, I'm a subscriber to you on YouTube. I'm a purchaser of your course. I like what you stand for, and I think this has been a great conversation. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it too, man. Thank you.
This episode was made possible by our friends at Fujifilm. Make images, share stories, and experience moments at the speed of life with Fujifilm. Thank you for staying home with us.